I hope you're all having a great day. Today we're going to talk about the Indiana Fever and why this upcoming free agency period is going to be incredibly important for them. And more specifically, why they need to be extremely careful with the players they decide to bring in. Because if they're not careful, there's a real chance they could repeat the same mistake they made with DeWanna Bonner. Now, before anyone jumps in the comments, this isn't about blaming Bonner or saying she's a bad player. In fact, the exact opposite is true. At the time the Fever signed her, it looked like a fantastic move. On paper, it made complete sense. But sometimes the right basketball decision doesn't work out in real life, and that's exactly what happened here. So, let's rewind a little bit and talk about the situation. Back in 2024, Bonner was still playing at an all-star level. She had a great season, she played well in the playoffs, and she was a starter for one of the best teams in the league. She was experienced, versatile, and exactly the type of veteran contender teams usually want. When free agency rolled around, most people expected her to reunite with Alyssa Thomas with the Phoenix Mercury. That seemed like the logical destination. The connection was there, the fit was there, and a lot of insiders believed that was where she would end up. However, there was one major factor that changed everything: money. Phoenix could only offer her a minimum contract. Meanwhile, the Indiana Fever had the cap space to offer a maximum deal. And in professional sports, that kind of difference matters. So Bonner accepted the max contract and headed to Indiana. At first, everything seemed perfect. She looked happy to be there. The organization clearly saw her as the centerpiece of their free agency class. She was even featured prominently in media coverage and quickly became the headline signing for the team. During preseason, her performances were fine. Not amazing, but not concerning either. She looked like a veteran easing into a new system. Then, opening night came around, and there was a pretty cool storyline attached to it. Bonner needed just 7 points to move into third place on the WNBA's all-time scoring list. That's a huge milestone for any player. And the moment happened in front of a packed arena at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Around 15,000 fans were there cheering her on. She scored the points, the crowd celebrated, and it felt like a perfect start to her Indiana chapter. After the game, Bonner even praised the fans. She talked about how incredible the atmosphere was and how much she appreciated the support. Everything looked positive. But then, the narrative changed almost overnight. Instead of talking about her milestone or the Fever's win, social media exploded with controversy. A story began circulating online accusing fans in the arena of making offensive noises towards Angel Reese. The claim itself was highly questionable. Later information suggested the person who originally made the claim wasn't even present at the game. There were also reports that a completely different individual, including personalities like Dave Portnoy, had been involved in a moment that people misinterpreted. But by that point, the damage had already been done. Instead of celebrating Bonner's historic moment, the entire conversation around that game shifted into controversy. The league began talking about investigating the situation, and the discussion became far bigger than basketball. From the outside looking in, it felt like that moment changed the entire tone of her time with Indiana. And this is where things start to matter for the Fever moving forward. When you play for Indiana right now, you're not just playing basketball. You're playing under a spotlight that very few women's national basketball teams have ever experienced before. A big part of that is the arrival of Caitlin Clark. Clark's popularity brought an enormous amount of attention to the league. Every Fever game suddenly became a major event. Media coverage exploded, social media conversations intensified, and every storyline surrounding the team became amplified. That kind of spotlight can be great when things are going well. Packed arenas, massive TV ratings, and constant coverage are amazing for the sport. But the downside is that every mistake, every rumor, and every controversy also gets amplified. And not every veteran player is prepared for that environment. At some point during the season, Bonner missed a game for personal reasons. What happened next was fascinating. Almost immediately, rumors began circulating online suggesting she wanted out of Indiana. Some people claimed she had requested a trade. Others said she would never play for the team again. Now, it's impossible to know how much of that was true. Social media rumors are often unreliable, but the speculation was everywhere. And from that moment forward, it seemed like the situation never fully stabilized. Meanwhile, the team itself was developing a very specific identity. The Fever locker room started embracing an us versus the world mentality. Players seemed to rally around the idea that critics, rival fans, and even some people within basketball circles were rooting against them. That mindset can be incredibly powerful in sports. Teams that embrace that mentality often become extremely close. The locker room bond becomes stronger and players fight harder for each other. But that kind of culture also requires everyone to fully buy in. And that's the real lesson the Fever have to remember as they approach free agency again. Talent alone isn't enough. You can sign the most skilled veteran in the league, but if that player isn't comfortable dealing with constant attention, constant narratives, and constant outside noise, it might not work. Some younger players don't seem to struggle with this as much. Many of them have grown up dealing with social media scrutiny since high school or college. By the time they reach the professional level, they're somewhat used to it. But veteran players who spent most of their careers in a quieter media environment might find it overwhelming. And that's why the Fever have to be extremely selective with the veterans they bring in. Take someone like Sophie Cunningham as an example. Ideally, Indiana would love to keep a player like her around because she understands the intensity and the spotlight that comes with this team. She also fits the competitive mindset the Fever seem to be building. But even if they can't bring her back, the key isn't replacing her exact skill set. The key is finding players who fit the culture. Because culture is clearly becoming one of Indiana's biggest strengths. Under head coach Stephanie White, the Fever have built a group that believes in each other and embraces the challenge of being the most talked about team in the league. That kind of mentality doesn't happen by accident. It comes from leadership, communication, and players who are willing to put the team first. If Indiana brings in veterans who aren't comfortable with that environment, it could disrupt what they're building. And we've already seen examples of players who struggled with the outside noise. There were moments where it seemed like the constant debates and online narratives affected players such as Nalissa Smith as well. Again, that's not criticism of the player. Anyone dealing with nonstop attention and criticism would find it difficult. But it does highlight the reality of playing for this particular team right now. The Fever are no longer just another WNBA franchise. They are arguably the most discussed team in the entire league. Every move they make gets analyzed, every game becomes a national conversation, and every player on the roster suddenly finds themselves under a much bigger spotlight. That's why the front office has to approach free agency differently than most teams. They're not just evaluating talent, they're evaluating mentality. They have to ask themselves one simple question about every potential signing. Can this player thrive in the spotlight that comes with playing for Indiana? If the answer is yes, then great, that player might be a perfect fit. But if there's even a small chance the outside narratives could become a distraction, the Fever might be better off going in a different direction. Because at this stage of the franchise's development, chemistry and mindset might matter just as much as raw ability. We've seen countless examples in sports where teams with slightly less talent outperform more talented rosters simply because their culture is stronger. Players who buy into the system often outperform players who don't, and that's why repeating the Bonner situation is something Indiana needs to avoid. Again, signing her wasn't a bad decision at the time. In fact, most analysts would have praised the move. But hindsight shows that talent alone doesn't guarantee success. Fit matters, personality matters, mental toughness matters, and perhaps most importantly for this particular team, the ability to ignore outside narratives matters. If the Fever can find veterans who embrace that environment rather than struggle with it, they could build something really special over the next few seasons. But if they bring in players who aren't prepared for the chaos that comes with the spotlight, history could repeat itself. And that's why this free agency period is so important. Anyway, that's just my perspective on the situation. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Do you think the Fever need to prioritize mentality over talent in free agency? Or should they simply sign the best players available and let everything else figure itself out? Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, I thank you guys for watching.